secret manifestation map for when it's not working, no matter how much you journal or visualize. Be careful with this video. Once you see which level of manifestation you're actually stuck in, you won't be able to blame bad luck or wrong timing anymore. Watch it till the end if you're ready to move to the next level and make your results match the work you're already doing. Level 1 is where most people begin, and it's where many remain for years. This is the cognitive intention phase, what we might call the wishing stage. You know what you want. You think about it regularly. Perhaps you create vision boards or write goals in a journal. But there's a disconnect between the conscious desire and the deeper belief systems running underneath. Neuroscientists would say your prefrontal cortex holds the goal, but your limbic system, which governs emotional responses and motivation, doesn't believe it's actually possible. The energy here is predominantly passive. You're hoping for outcomes without changing the inputs. You want financial abundance, but your daily actions reflect scarcity programming. You want meaningful relationships, but your nervous system is still coded for the protection patterns that kept you isolated. The reticular activating system in your brainstem, which filters what information reaches your conscious awareness, is still tuned to confirm the old story rather than highlight evidence of the new one. What makes level 1 so common is that it feels safe. Wanting something theoretically doesn't require vulnerability or risk. You can dream without exposing yourself to rejection or failure. But here's what the research shows. Your brain doesn't distinguish clearly between what you say you want and what your behavior demonstrates you expect. When there's misalignment between stated goals and actual behavior patterns, your nervous system defaults to the behavior because it's backed by years of neural reinforcement. Level 2 represents a significant shift. This is the behavioral activation phase. You've recognized that intention alone doesn't restructure reality, so you begin taking action. You apply for opportunities. You initiate conversations. You start projects. You show up in spaces where change could happen. Your prefrontal cortex and your motor cortex are now coordinating. You're translating thought into movement. The challenge at level 2 is that action without internal alignment often comes from a place of compensation rather than creation. You're doing more to prove you're enough, working harder to outrun the fear that you're not. The hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, your stress response system, is often activated here. You're in chronic low-grade fight or flight, pushing and forcing rather than flowing and attracting. What happens at level 2 is you might achieve external markers of success, but they don't create the internal shift you expected. You get the promotion, but the anxiety about being found out remains. You start the relationship, but the abandonment patterns resurface. You hit the income goal, but the scarcity mindset adjusts the goalpost immediately. This is because you're operating from the same identity that created the previous results, just working harder within it. Level 3 is where neuroscience gets really interesting. This is the systemic integration phase, what we call alignment. You begin to understand that manifestation isn't just cognitive or behavioral. It's about restructuring the underlying systems that generate both thoughts and actions. You're working at the level of identity, belief architecture, and environmental design. At this level, you're engaging in what psychologists call metacognition, thinking about your thinking. You notice the automatic thoughts that precede self-sabotage. You observe the emotional patterns that arise right before breakthrough moments. You become aware of your reticular activating system's current programming, and you begin deliberately retraining it. When you consistently direct attention toward evidence of capability, reciprocity, and possibility, the filter adjusts. New information that was always present suddenly becomes visible. The quality of action at level 3 changes completely. You're no longer forcing or compensating. You're designing conditions where desired outcomes become more probable. You set clear boundaries, which reduces cognitive load and conserves decision-making energy. You price your work fairly, which attracts clients whose values align with yours. You ship completed work rather than endlessly perfecting, which creates feedback loops that inform better decisions. Neurologically, something profound happens here. The chronic stress response begins to downregulate. Your parasympathetic nervous system, responsible for rest and repair, gets more activation time. When you're not constantly in threat mode, your prefrontal cortex functions more effectively. Better executive function means better planning, better impulse control, better pattern recognition. You start seeing connections and opportunities that anxiety had been filtering out. Results at level 3 often feel almost effortless compared to the grinding at level 2. But that's not because less is happening. It's because effort is finally aligned with a functional system. A network contact resurfaces at the exact moment you need that connection. An opportunity emerges that matches your newly clarified standards. Resources flow with less friction because you've removed the internal contradictions that were creating resistance. Level 4 is where most people don't realize they can go, and it's where the research on expertise and mastery becomes relevant. This is the maintenance and multiplication phase, what we call stewardship. You've learned to not just attract what you want, but to maintain and grow it. You understand that acquisition and retention are different skill sets requiring different neural pathways. Studies on lottery winners and sudden wealth show that without the psychological infrastructure to manage resources, people return to their baseline within years. The same applies to relationships, health, and career success. Getting there activated one set of competencies. Staying there requires another. At level 4, you've developed what researchers call psychological capital, the resilience, optimism, and self-efficacy that allows sustained performance. Your relationship with what you've manifested changes here. You're no longer clutching it desperately, afraid it will disappear. You're allocating it wisely, investing and compounding returns. You place money in ways that generate passive income. You invest in skills that multiply your capacity. You design systems that produce results repeatedly without requiring heroic individual efforts each time. You've moved from outcome dependence to process trust. The neuroscience here involves habit consolidation and automaticity. When behaviors are repeated consistently in stable contexts, they require less prefrontal cortex activation over time. They become automatic, which frees up cognitive resources for higher-level strategic thinking. You're not exhausting willpower on basic disciplines anymore, because those disciplines have become default operations. Level 5 represents a fascinating shift that researchers in positive psychology and flow states have documented. This is the generative contribution phase, what we call overflow. You've built such robust internal systems and external structures that you have genuine surplus. Not the performative giving that masks depletion, but authentic overflow that comes from a replenished source. Brain imaging studies of people engaged in altruistic acts show activation in reward centers, the same areas that light up with personal pleasure. But there's a distinction. Sustainable giving from overflow activates these areas without triggering stress responses, while depleted giving shows simultaneous activation of threat processing regions. Your brain knows the difference between generous abundance and compensatory self-sacrifice. At level 5, you understand manifestation was never primarily about accumulation. It was about becoming a person whose natural functioning creates value that attracts corresponding resources. You're not extracting from the world, but participating in exchanges where everyone involved gains something. The wanting doesn't vanish, but its quality transforms. You want from curiosity and creative possibility, not from lack and compensation. The research on flow states is relevant here. When you're operating from level 5, you spend more time in flow, that state where challenge and skill are balanced, where action and awareness merge, where time perception shifts. Flow states are associated with decreased activity in the prefrontal cortex, what researchers call transient hypofrontality. Your analytical, self-conscious narrator quiets down, and you operate from integrated intelligence. Here's what's crucial to understand about these levels from a scientific perspective. They represent increasingly complex integrations of brain systems. Level 1 is primarily prefrontal, conscious thought about desires. Level 2 adds motor cortex and reward systems, taking action toward goals. Level 3 integrates limbic emotional processing with executive function, aligning feeling with thinking and doing. Level 4 consolidates learning into the basal ganglia where habits live, creating automaticity. Level 5 represents whole brain integration, where multiple systems operate in coordinated flow. You can't skip developmental phases because each level builds neural infrastructure required for the next. You can't install level 4 automaticity without the level 3 alignment work. You can't achieve level 5 flow without the level 4 foundation of sustainable systems. The brain develops capabilities sequentially, each phase preparing the ground for what follows. Most people oscillate between level 1 and 2 because they're trying to think and work their way to different outcomes without restructuring the identity generating those outcomes. They want level 5 results with level 1 consciousness. But neuroscience is clear. Lasting change requires changing the system that generates behavior, not just modifying the behavior itself. Wherever you are right now, the next level is available through small, consistent adjustments. If you're at level 1, the bridge to level 2 is aligned action, even small steps that match stated desires. If you're at level 2 feeling exhausted, the bridge to level 3 is internal work on beliefs, attention patterns, and environmental design. If you're at level 3 with flow beginning, the bridge to level 4 is systematizing what works so it compounds. If you're at level 4 with stable systems, the bridge to level 5 is finding ways your overflow and naturally serves others. The shift between levels often begins with a moment of metacognitive awareness. You catch yourself in an old pattern, and instead of just running it automatically, you pause. That pause creates space. In that space, choice becomes possible. Different choice repeated becomes new pattern. New pattern sustained becomes new identity. New identity generates new reality. Your reticular activating system, that attention filter in your brainstem, is remarkably trainable. When you consistently direct attention toward evidence that aligns with where you're going rather than where you've been, the filter adjusts its priorities. Information that supports your new direction begins surfacing more readily. Opportunities you would have missed become obvious. This isn't magic. It's selective attention being deliberately programmed. The levels aren't about superiority or competition. They're about development, the natural unfolding of increasing integration and capability. Each level is perfect for what it teaches. Each level contains lessons you'll need for the next. And each level, when fully experienced, naturally creates readiness for what follows. If you've stayed with this until now, Some part of your nervous system recognizes itself in this framework. You can feel where you are and sense where you're headed. That recognition itself is data. Your attention filter brought you here because some aspect of this information matches what your system is ready to integrate. The universe, if we're speaking in those terms, isn't judging your level, but it is responding to your signal. The signal isn't just what you say you want. It's the electromagnetic output of your entire being, the sum of your thoughts, emotions, actions, and attention patterns. As you move through these levels, that signal clarifies and strengthens. The response becomes proportionally clearer. Trust where you are. Work with what's in front of you. Build the foundation before reaching for the height. Let each level teach you completely before rushing to the next. That patience isn't passive waiting. It's active integration of capabilities that will serve you for everything that follows. The progression is already happening. You're already further than you were, and the next level is already forming as you read these words.